The signal came at 3:47 in the morning, Earth time. It was weak and broken, traveling across thousands of light years through the cold emptiness of space. Most species would have missed it. Most species were not listening. But humanity had never stopped listening. Admiral Bayek Sung-ho was 63 years old. He had gray hair, tired eyes, and hands that still remembered the controls of a fighter ship. He had fought in the Sol Wars 30 years ago, when humanity nearly destroyed itself. He had seen things that still visited him in his dreams. Now he sat in his office in Seoul, reading reports about supply lines and training schedules, pretending that peace was permanent. His communicator beeped. He looked at the screen and felt his blood turn cold. The message was simple. 3 words, repeated over and over. Please help us. It came from the Vela Expanse, a region of space so far from Earth that most humans had never heard of it. The signal carried identification codes from a colony ship called the New Dawn. 40,000 people. 12,000 of them were children. Admiral Bayek made 3 calls in the next 10 minutes. The first was to Earth's Intelligence Division. They confirmed what he already feared. The Drakari hegemony had been spotted near the Vela Expanse. The Drakari were slavers. They had built an empire by capturing other species and selling them. They were old, powerful, and completely without mercy. The second call was to the Galactic Council. Admiral Bayek requested emergency assistance. He explained the situation clearly. 40,000 civilians, children, a slaver fleet closing in. The Council's response came within the hour. They expressed their sympathy. They noted that the Vela Expanse was neutral territory. Treaties prevented military action in neutral space. They wished humanity the best in this difficult time. They would not help. Admiral Bayek sat alone in his office for a long time after that call ended. He thought about the Council and their treaties. He thought about the elder species who had traveled the stars for millions of years, who looked at humanity like adults look at noisy children. They called humans young and foolish. They said humans were too emotional, too violent, too unpredictable. Maybe they were right. Admiral Bayek made his third call. Captain Yoon Dae-soo was 41 years old. He had been a soldier for 20 years. He had commanded ships in battles that the history books preferred to forget. 5 years ago, when the last of the old warships were officially destroyed, he had been given a quiet retirement and a small pension. He spent his days fishing in a lake near his childhood home, trying to forget the things he had done. When his communicator rang at 4 in the morning, he knew immediately that his retirement was over. "We have a situation," Admiral Bayek said. His voice was calm, but Yoon knew him well enough to hear the tension underneath. "The Ghost Fleet needs to wake up." Yoon closed his eyes. He had hoped he would never hear those words. "How bad?" he asked. 40,000 civilians, Drakari slavers. The Council won't help." There was a long silence. "I'll be there in 6 hours," Yoon said. The Ghost Fleet was humanity's greatest secret and its greatest shame. When humans first reached the stars, they found a galaxy full of ancient civilizations. These elder species had rules and traditions stretching back millions of years. They welcomed humanity into their community, but they had conditions. Humans were too warlike, they said, too dangerous. Before humanity could join the Galactic Council, they had to destroy their most powerful weapons. Humanity agreed. They held public ceremonies where their deadliest warships were broken apart and melted down. The elder species watched with approval. The young ones were learning to be civilized. But humanity had never been good at following rules. Deep in the asteroid belt beyond Mars, hidden from every sensor in the galaxy, 17 warships waited in the darkness. They were the survivors of the Sol Wars, built during humanity's darkest hour. They were not elegant or beautiful. They were weapons, pure and simple, designed to end wars as quickly and brutally as possible. For 60 years, they had slept. Now they woke up. Chief Engineer O.J. Wan was 72 years old. He was the only person alive who knew every system on the old warships. He had helped build them during the war, and he had spent the decades since keeping them ready, just in case. When the activation signal came, he was already in the hangar bay of the Pale Horse, humanity's largest and most terrible dreadnought. "I knew this day would come," he said to no one in particular. His hands moved across the control panels with the ease of long practice. Lights flickered on throughout the massive ship. Engines that had been silent for 60 years began to hum. Captain Yoon arrived 6 hours later as promised. He walked through the corridors of the Pale Horse with the expression of a man returning to a house where something terrible had happened. He knew this ship. He had commanded her in the final battles of the Sol Wars. He had done things on this ship that he had spent years trying to forget. "She remembers you," Engineer O said, watching the captain's face. "I know," Yoon replied. "I wish she didn't." Lieutenant Commander Park Hana was waiting on the bridge. She was 35 years old with sharp eyes and a mind that could calculate firing solutions faster than most computers. She had studied the old battles, the forbidden ones that weren't taught in schools anymore. She knew what these ships could do. "The crew is assembling," she reported. "Mostly veterans, people who remember." Yoon nodded. He looked around the bridge at the faces of men and women who had answered the call. They were not young. They were not eager. They knew exactly what they were being asked to do. "You all know what this means," Yoon said. "The moment we leave this asteroid field, we become criminals. The Council will never forgive us. Earth might face sanctions, isolation, maybe worse." He paused. "But there are 40,000 people out there who asked for help. 12,000 of them are children, and nobody else is coming." He looked at each of them in turn. "So we're going to go out there, and we're going to bring them home. And if the Drakari get in our way, we're going to remind the galaxy why they made us destroy these ships in the first place." No one cheered. This was not that kind of moment. But every person on that bridge stood a little straighter, and their eyes grew hard with purpose. The Ghost Fleet moved out of the asteroid field and pointed toward the Vela Expanse. Humanity was coming. The journey to the Vela Expanse would take 11 days. 11 days of traveling through the cold darkness between stars. 11 days of waiting, preparing, and remembering. Captain Yoon spent most of his time walking through the Pale Horse, relearning her corridors and compartments. The ship was old, but Engineer O had kept her in perfect condition. Every weapon was ready. Every system was operational. She was a sleeping predator that had finally opened her eyes. The crew worked in quiet efficiency. These were not young soldiers hungry for glory. They were veterans who understood exactly what they were about to do. Many of them had families back on Earth. They had left behind peaceful lives to answer this call. Lieutenant Commander Park Hana found the captain standing alone in the observation deck, watching the stars blur past as the ship traveled faster than light. "You're not sleeping," she said. "Neither are you." Hana stood beside him. She was holding a tablet with tactical information about the Drakari fleet. "Intelligence says they have 40 ships near the colony vessel," she said. "Standard slaver formation. They like to take their time, enjoy the fear." Yoon's jaw tightened. "How long until they board?" "Based on their usual patterns, they'll spend another few days circling. They think it's funny to let the prey exhaust themselves hoping for rescue. And no one ever comes. No one ever comes," Hana agreed. "Until now." On the third day of the journey, Dr. Shin Mi-young came to see the captain. She was the ship's medical officer, a small woman with gentle hands and sad eyes. She had joined the military as a healer, not a fighter. The idea of war made her sick. "I need to understand something," she said. "These ships, the weapons they carry. I've read the old files. The things they can do. She couldn't finish the sentence. Yoon looked at her for a long moment. He respected her honesty. Most people were afraid to ask. During the Sol Wars, he said slowly, humanity was dying. We had turned our weapons on each other. Billions were dead. The elder species watched from the stars and did nothing. They said it was not their place to interfere. He paused, remembering things he usually kept locked away. So we built ships that could end the war fast, ships that didn't wound or disable, ships that killed, quickly and completely. We pointed them at each other and threatened to destroy everything. And it worked. It worked. Both sides realized that continuing the war meant extinction. They stopped fighting. Peace came from the fear of total death. Dr. Shin looked troubled. And now we're taking those same weapons to use on someone else. Yes. Doesn't that make us monsters? Yoon was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. Maybe it does. But there are 12,000 children on that colony ship who are about to become slaves. They'll be separated from their parents. They'll be sold to the highest bidder. They'll spend their lives in chains, and they'll die alone and forgotten. He met her eyes. I would rather be a monster than let that happen. On the 6th day, Engineer O gathered the younger crew members in the engine room. They were mostly technicians and support staff, people who had never served on the old warships. You need to understand why these ships exist, he said. His voice was rough with age, but his eyes were sharp. You need to understand what humanity is. He pulled up images on the display screen. Earth, as seen from space, beautiful and blue. The elder species, they evolved on peaceful worlds. They had millions of years to develop slowly, carefully. They built their civilizations on cooperation and stability. He changed the image. Now it showed Earth's history, wars, famines, disasters, the long, bloody story of human civilization. We didn't have that luxury. Earth tried to kill us every single day. Ice ages, plagues, predators, each other. We survived because we learned to be dangerous. We learned that sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to become something terrible. He looked at the young faces around him. The council species fear us because they've seen our history. They saw a species that created nuclear weapons and then actually used them. On ourselves. And we survived. We came out of that fire and reached for the stars anyway. Isn't that a bad thing? One young technician asked. Maybe, O admitted. But it's also why we're the only ones going to help those people. The council species have forgotten how to fight. They've forgotten what it means to risk everything for strangers. They've become too civilized to save anyone. He smiled grimly. We never forgot how to be monsters. And sometimes monsters are exactly what you need. On the 9th day, they received a transmission from the colony ship. The message was weak, almost lost in the static of deep space. But the communications officer managed to clean it up enough to understand. A woman's voice, tired and afraid, but still holding together. This is Governor Choi Eun-bi of the colony ship New Dawn. To anyone who can hear this, we are surrounded by Drakari vessels. They have disabled our engines. They are telling us to prepare for boarding. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked. We have 40,000 people here, 12,000 children. We know no one is supposed to help us. We know the treaties. But we're sending this message anyway, because we have to believe that somewhere out there, someone will care. Another pause. In the background, they could hear children crying. If you can hear this, please. We're not asking for miracles. We just don't want to disappear without anyone knowing. We don't want to be forgotten. The message ended. On the bridge of the Pale Horse, no one spoke for a long time. Captain Yoon stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face like stone. How far? He asked quietly. 2 days, Hana replied. Yoon turned to face his crew. Send a response. Tell them to hold on. Tell them help is coming. Sir, if we transmit, the Drakari will know we're coming. Good. Yoon's voice was hard. I want them to know. I want them to have time to be afraid. The message went out across the void. New Dawn, this is the United Earth ship Pale Horse. We heard your call. We're coming to bring you home. Hold on for 2 more days. We're coming. Across the galaxy, species who had been monitoring the frequencies heard the transmission. They didn't know what to make of it. Humanity was supposed to be weak, insignificant, a minor species barely worth noticing. But there was something in that message, something in the simple promise of, we're coming, that made ancient beings feel a strange chill. In 2 days, they would understand why. Commodore Drektar had been hunting lesser species for over 200 years. He had captured millions of slaves across dozens of star systems. He had grown rich and powerful from the suffering of others, and he had never once felt guilty about it. The weak existed to serve the strong. This was the natural order of things. When his fleet surrounded the human colony ship, he felt nothing but satisfaction. 40,000 new slaves. The younger ones would be especially valuable. Humans were becoming popular in certain markets. They were hardy, they learned quickly, and they broke beautifully. He was in no hurry. He liked to let his prey marinate in fear. It made them more compliant later. Then the transmission came. New Dawn. This is the United Earth ship Pale Horse. We heard your call. We're coming to bring you home. Drektar laughed when he heard it. He laughed so hard that his officers looked at him with concern. The humans think they can challenge us, he said, his translator converting his clicks and hisses into words. How many ships? Our long-range sensors detect 17 vessels, Commodore. 17. Drektar's laugh deepened. I have 40. This will be amusing. He had read the reports on humanity, young species, primitive technology. They had barely been in space for a few centuries. The Galactic Council treated them like children, and for good reason. Let them come, Drektar decided. When we destroy their little fleet, we'll have even more slaves. Perhaps I'll make their captain watch as I sell his crew one by one. On the colony ship New Dawn, Governor Choi Yun-bi gathered her people in the main hall. The space was crowded with frightened faces. Parents held their children close. The elderly sat in quiet dignity, preparing for the worst. We received a response, she announced. Her voice was steady, though her hands were shaking. Earth heard us. They're sending ships. A murmur ran through the crowd. Hope mixed with disbelief. How many ships? Someone called out. 17. The murmur died. Everyone knew the Drakari had 40 ships surrounding them. 17 against 40 was not a rescue. It was a suicide mission. They're coming anyway? A young mother asked, clutching her daughter to her chest. Governor Choi nodded. They're coming anyway. In the corner of the hall, a small girl named Nira sat with her tablet. She was 11 years old. She was the one who had sent the original SOS, using frequencies she had learned about in history class. Old human military frequencies that nobody used anymore. She had never expected anyone to answer. Now she watched the adults around her crying and praying and holding each other. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she understood one thing. Somewhere out there, strangers were coming to die for them. She started recording. The Ghost Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at exactly 0600 hours, Vela Expanse local time. Captain Yoon stood on the bridge of the Pale Horse, watching the tactical display fill with red dots. 40 Drakari ships, arranged in a classic containment formation around the colony vessel. They were big and heavily armed, built for intimidation as much as combat. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. Put it through! Commodore Drektar's face appeared on the main screen. He was a tall creature with gray skin and too many eyes, all of them filled with amusement. Little humans, he said, You came all this way to die? I admire your courage. It will make your slavery more interesting. Yoon's face showed nothing. His voice was calm and flat. Commodore, this is your one chance. Release the colony ship. Leave this space. If you do this now, no one has to die today. Drektar's laugh was ugly. You have 17 ships. I have 40. Your species has been in space for mere centuries. Mine has ruled these stars for millennia. You are nothing but prey pretending to be predators. You're right, Yoon said. We've only been in space for a few centuries, but we spent the millions of years before that learning how to kill things bigger than us. It's what we do. He leaned forward slightly. Last chance, Commodore. Leave now, or learn why the Galactic Council made us destroy these ships. Drektar ended the transmission with a gesture of contempt. He ordered his fleet to attack. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Later, military analysts from dozens of species would study the recordings. They would slow them down, analyze every movement, try to understand what happened. Most would fail. The human ships did not fight like council species. There was no posturing, no formal challenge, no attempt at honor. The moment the Drakari fleet began to move, the Ghost Fleet responded with overwhelming violence. Lieutenant Commander Park Hana had spent years studying ancient Earth warfare. She had read about wolves and how they hunted. She had studied pack tactics, ambush strategies, the way predators isolate and destroy their prey. She had taught these things to the fleet. The human ships moved as one creature, 17 parts of a single mind. They did not spread out or hold formation. They struck like a fist, concentrating all their fire on single targets, destroying them in seconds, then moving to the next. Pilot Kim Yuri led the fighter squadrons. She was 29 years old, the youngest ace in fleet history. Her pilots flew like maniacs, weaving between enemy fire, delivering precise strikes to weak points that the Drakari didn't know they had. The Pale Horse herself was the hammer. Her main weapons had been designed during the Sol Wars to crack open planetary defense stations. Against the Drakari ships, they were almost unfair. Each shot that connected turned an enemy vessel into expanding clouds of debris. Commodore Drektar watched his fleet die and could not understand what was happening. These were supposed to be primitive humans. Their ships were supposed to be inferior. His species had ruled this region of space for thousands of years. How? He screamed at his officers. How are they doing this? No one could answer him. The humans fought without hesitation, without mercy, without any of the restraint that civilized species were supposed to show. They didn't aim to disable or capture. They aimed to kill. Every shot was meant to destroy completely. In 11 minutes, 31 Drakari ships were reduced to scattered atoms. The remaining 9 broke formation and ran. They abandoned their Commodore, abandoned the mission, abandoned everything in their desperate need to escape. Commodore Drektar's flagship was the last to fall. As his ship broke apart around him, he managed one final transmission. "What are you?" he screamed into the void. Captain Yoon watched the flagship explode on his display screen. His face was still calm, but there was something ancient and terrible in his eyes. "We're human," he said quietly, though no one could hear him anymore. "And you touched our children." On the colony ship New Dawn, 40,000 people watched through the windows as the Drakari fleet died. They saw the impossible happen. They saw 17 ships destroy 40. Governor Choi stood in shock, tears running down her face. Little Nira kept recording. She captured the moment when the last Drakari ship exploded. She captured the faces of children realizing they would not become slaves. She captured adults falling to their knees in relief and disbelief. And she captured the moment when Captain Yoon's voice came through the speakers, gentle despite everything that had just happened. "New Dawn, this is the Pale Horse. The enemy has been neutralized. We're coming alongside to escort you home. You're safe now." "Thank you," Governor Choi whispered. "Thank you." No need to thank us, Yoon replied. You called for help. We answered. That's what humans do. Across the galaxy, beings who had been monitoring the battle sat in stunned silence. They had watched 17 human ships destroy a fleet more than twice their size in less than 15 minutes. The humans had been hiding these weapons all along, and they had unleashed them to save 40,000 strangers. The universe would never look at humanity the same way again. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 6 hours after the battle ended. Representatives from over 300 species gathered in the Great Hall on the Council's orbital station. The air was thick with tension and fear. Ambassador Kryn of the Veloth Collective spoke first. His people were ancient, having traveled the stars for over 10 million years. They considered themselves the guardians of galactic civilization. The humans have violated every treaty they signed, Kryn declared. His voice echoed through the chamber. They claim to destroy their warships. They lied. They have committed an act of aggression in neutral space. They must face consequences. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Many species had always been uncomfortable with humanity. Now their fears seemed justified. We propose immediate sanctions, Kryn continued. Trade restrictions, travel bans. The humans must be reminded of their place in the galactic order. Earth's ambassador, a woman named Lee Soon-hee, stood to respond. She was 58 years old, a career diplomat who had spent her life building bridges between humanity and the elder species. Now she watched those bridges burn. The Council denied our request for assistance, she said calmly. 40,000 people were about to be taken as slaves. 12,000 of them were children. We did what we had to do. You had no right, another delegate shouted. The Vela Expanse is neutral territory. Your treaties forbid military action there. Our treaties also forbid slavery, Ambassador Lee replied. Yet the Drakari have operated freely for centuries while this council did nothing. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Accusations flew back and forth. Ancient species accused humanity of barbarism. Humanity's few allies tried to defend them but were shouted down. Then something unexpected happened. A delegate from the Marine Confederation stood up. The Marine were a small species, considered unimportant by the elder races. They had been raided by the Drakari for generations. We received a message from our homeworld, the Marine delegate said. His voice was quiet, but something in it made the chamber fall silent. Our people are asking a question. He paused. They want to know why the humans were the only ones who answered. Why, when 40,000 innocents were about to be enslaved, the great and ancient council did nothing. Why the burden of doing the right thing fell on a species you call young and primitive. Ambassador Kryn started to respond. But the Marine delegate continued. For 200 years, my people have begged this council for protection from the Drakari. For 200 years, you have told us that treaties prevent action, that the situation is complicated, that we must be patient. And for 200 years, our children have disappeared into slave markets while you debated protocol. His voice grew stronger. The humans didn't debate. They didn't form committees. They heard a cry for help and they came. Perhaps they broke your laws. But your laws were already broken. They were broken the first time this council chose treaties over lives. The chamber was silent. Then, one by one, other delegates began to stand. Species that had suffered under Drakari raids. Species that had lost people to slavers. Species that had begged for help and been told to wait. They didn't speak. They just stood. A silent vote of support for humanity's actions. Ambassador Lee watched with tears in her eyes. She had expected condemnation. She had not expected this. But the moment of unity did not last. A new message arrived, projected onto the great screen at the center of the chamber. It was from the Drakari hegemony. The face that appeared was older and crueler than Commodore Drektar's. This was High Lord Drekvos, Supreme Commander of all Drakari forces. Council species, he said, his voice like ice. You have allowed the humans to murder our warriors. You have permitted this insult to our honor. We understand. You are weak. You have always been weak. He leaned forward, all 6 eyes burning with hatred. But the humans are not protected by your weakness. They have declared war on the Drakari hegemony, and we will answer. Our full fleet is mobilizing. 300 warships. We will burn their homeworld to ash. We will take their entire species as slaves. And when we are done, we will remind the galaxy what happens to those who challenge us. The transmission ended. The council chamber exploded into chaos. On Earth, Admiral Beck received the intelligence report in his office. 300 Drakari warships heading toward the solar system. The largest military force the hegemony had assembled in centuries. He had 17 ships. His communications officer appeared at the door. Sir, the council is demanding we surrender our fleet. They say it's the only way to avoid war. And if we surrender? The Drakari have made their terms clear. They want Earth's population delivered to them as slaves. All of it. Admiral Bayek nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Drakari didn't want peace. They wanted revenge. They wanted to make an example of humanity that would terrify the galaxy for generations. Get me a channel to every human ship, station, and colony, he said. Priority 1. Sir, I'm calling the fleet. We only have 17 warships. Admiral Beck smiled grimly. We have more than that. We've just forgotten. The message went out across human space. It reached military bases and civilian stations. It reached colony worlds and mining outposts. It reached generation ships that had been traveling between stars for decades. It was simple, direct, and it held nothing back. This is Admiral Bayek Sung-ho of Earth's United Defense Force. The Drakari hegemony is sending 300 warships to enslave our species. The Galactic Council will not help us. No one will help us. We stand alone. He paused. But we have always stood alone. We were alone when we crawled out of the oceans. We were alone when we survived the ice ages. We were alone when we reached for the stars. And we survived every time, because we refused to give up. His voice grew stronger. I am calling every ship that can fly, every vessel that can carry a weapon, every human who is willing to stand between our home and those who would destroy it. I am not promising victory. I am not promising survival. I am promising only this. We will face them together, and we will show the galaxy what humanity is made of. He took a breath. The Drakari think we are prey. They are wrong. We are the species that hunted mammoths with sharpened sticks. We are the species that split the atom and walked on moons. We are the species that refuses to die, no matter how hard the universe tries to kill us. So come. Come if you can fly. Come if you can fight. Come if you are human and you are not afraid to prove it. Earth is calling, and I know you will answer. The message ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the responses began to pour in. From Mars, the Colonial Defense Force reported ready for deployment. From the asteroid belt, mining ships announced they were arming themselves with industrial lasers. From Jupiter's moons, research stations volunteered their transport vessels. From the generation ship Eternal Hope, traveling between stars for the last 40 years, came a simple message. We're turning around. We're coming home. From civilian stations, from private yachts, from freighters and ferries and exploration vessels, the answer came back. Ships that had no business in a war zone. Ships held together with hope and determination. Ships crewed by farmers and teachers and engineers who had never held a weapon. They all said the same thing. We're coming. Captain Yoon stood on the bridge of the Pale Horse, watching the tactical display fill with green dots. Human ships, thousands of them, converging on Earth. They're really coming, Lieutenant Commander Park said quietly. All of them. Did you expect anything else? She thought about it. No, I suppose I didn't. The Ghost Fleet took its position at the center of the forming armada. Around them, humanity gathered. Not a military force, a family, a species that had decided, together, that they would not go quietly into slavery. The Drakari were coming with 300 warships. They would find 3,700 human vessels waiting for them. Most were not warships. Most had no chance of surviving a real battle, but they came anyway because that was what humans did when their home was threatened. They came anyway. High Lord Drekvos led his fleet toward Earth with absolute confidence. 300 warships, the largest force his species had assembled in 500 years. Each vessel was a masterpiece of destruction, crewed by warriors who had spent their lives conquering lesser species. The humans had surprised him once. They would not surprise him again. His scouts reached the solar system first and sent back their report. Drekvos read it 3 times, certain there was an error. 3,700 vessels, he demanded. Yes, High Lord, but our analysis indicates that fewer than 100 are actual warships. The rest appear to be civilian ships, freighters, transport vessels. Some appear to be mining equipment. Drekvos felt a moment of confusion, then understanding. The humans were desperate. They had gathered everything that could fly, hoping that numbers would make up for quality. It was pathetic. It was almost sad. Proceed as planned, he ordered. Destroy them all. The Drakari fleet entered the solar system in perfect formation. 300 warships arranged in a spear aimed directly at Earth. Waiting for them was the strangest fleet in galactic history. At the center stood the 17 ships of the Ghost Fleet, dark and terrible, their weapons powered and ready. Around them spread the human armada, a chaos of vessels that had no business being in a battle. Cargo ships with welded-on armor, passenger liners with mining lasers mounted on their hulls, a generation ship so old its hull was scarred by decades of micrometeorites. Captain Yoon looked at the tactical display and felt something he hadn't expected. Pride. They had all come, rich and poor, young and old, from every corner of human space. They had come knowing they might die. They had come because Earth called and they couldn't stay away. He opened a channel to the fleet. I'm not going to lie to you, he said. Many of us won't survive today. We're facing professional warriors with ships built for war. Most of you have never been in a real battle. He paused. But I've read your messages. I know why you came. You came because somewhere out there there's a child who might grow up free instead of in chains. You came because your parents taught you that some things are worth dying for. You came because you're human, and humans don't abandon their own. His voice grew quiet. Whatever happens today, I want you to know that I'm proud to stand beside you. All of you. Now let's show these slavers what we're made of. The Drakari fleet attacked. What followed would be studied and debated for centuries. Military academies across the galaxy would teach the Battle of Earth as an example of what happens when superior technology meets absolute determination. The Drakari had every advantage. Their ships were stronger, faster, better armed. Their warriors were trained professionals. By every calculation, they should have won easily. They didn't understand humans. The human fleet did not meet them in formal battle lines. Instead, they swarmed. Thousands of small ships surrounded Drakari warships like angry insects, stinging from every direction. When one human ship was destroyed, 2 more took its place. Pilot Kim Yuri led her fighter squadrons in impossible maneuvers, weaving between enemy fire, striking at weak points, drawing attention away from the larger ships. She lost half her pilots in the first hour. The survivors fought harder. The Ghost Fleet moved through the chaos like wolves through sheep. The Pale Horse alone destroyed 18 Drakari vessels, her ancient weapons cutting through enemy armor like paper. Captain Yoon commanded from the bridge, his voice calm and steady, even as explosions bloomed around them. But the humans took losses. Terrible losses. A cargo ship called the Morning Star rammed a Drakari cruiser when her weapons failed. Both ships exploded together, and 300 human crew died in an instant. A passenger liner named the Hope of Tomorrow absorbed a missile barrage meant for a hospital ship behind her. She broke apart slowly, giving her crew time to evacuate. Not all of them made it. The generation ship Eternal Hope, 40 years into her journey between stars, positioned herself between the Drakari fleet and Earth. She was too old and slow to fight properly, but she could block. She took hit after hit, her ancient hull crumbling, until finally she went silent. 2,000 people died on that ship, families who had spent their whole lives traveling toward a new home they would never see. Dr. Shin Mi-young worked in the Pale Horse's medical bay, treating the wounded as they arrived. There were too many. There were always too many. She worked until her hands shook and her vision blurred, saving who she could, holding the hands of those she couldn't. A young engineer died on her table, 19 years old, his last words a request that someone tell his mother he was brave. She told herself she would remember his name forever. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Drakari fleet was broken. Of 300 warships, fewer than 50 survived, and those were fleeing toward the edge of the solar system as fast as their engines could carry them. High Lord Drekvos was among the dead, his flagship torn apart by a concentrated strike from 6 human vessels working together. But the cost was devastating. Of the 3,700 human ships that had gathered at Earth, barely 2,000 remained. Thousands of people had died. The debris field stretched across millions of kilometers, a graveyard of broken ships and shattered dreams. Captain Yoon stood on the bridge of the damaged Pale Horse, looking at the tactical display. The battle was over. They had won. He felt nothing but exhaustion. 3 days later, Admiral Beck addressed the Galactic Council. He was tired. They all were. Earth was still counting its dead. Families were still learning that their loved ones would never come home. But the Council had demanded an explanation, and Admiral Beck intended to give them one. "You asked us to explain ourselves," he began. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent chamber. "You want to know why we violated your treaties, why we hid our weapons, why we fought when you told us to stand down." He looked at the assembled delegates, ancient beings who had watched the battle and could not understand what they had seen. "We did it because someone asked for help." He let that simple statement hang in the air. 40,000 people called out into the darkness, hoping someone would answer. You didn't. You had your reasons, your treaties, your protocols. And I understand that. You've built a civilization based on rules and agreements and careful balance. He paused. But we're human. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We survived because we learned to protect each other. When someone in our tribe was in danger, we didn't debate protocol. We picked up weapons and we fought. He gestured toward Earth, visible through the great windows of the council chamber. We know what we are. We know our history. The wars, the violence, the terrible things we've done to each other. We're not proud of it. But we also know what that history taught us. His voice grew stronger. It taught us that there are things worth fighting for. It taught us that protecting the innocent is more important than protecting ourselves. It taught us that sometimes the only answer to evil is to stand up and say no more. He looked at each delegate in turn. We didn't ask to be the ones who answered that call. We would have preferred if you had done it, but you didn't. And we couldn't live with ourselves if we had done nothing. He took a breath. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to go home. We're going to bury our dead. We're going to rebuild our ships and hold our families and try to heal from what we've lost. And then we're going to keep watching. Keep listening. Because somewhere out there, someone else is going to call for help. And when they do, we'll answer. We'll always answer. He turned to leave, then looked back one last time. You can join us if you want. You can remember what it means to protect people who can't protect themselves, or you can stay here in your council chambers debating treaties while the galaxy burns. The choice is yours, but we've already made ours." He walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the council sat in silence. For the first time in millions of years, the ancient species of the galaxy looked at humanity and saw something they didn't expect. They saw hope. On Earth, little Nira stood with her mother, looking up at the night sky. The debris from the battle was still visible, a faint shimmer across the stars. "Why did they come?" she asked. "All those people who died, they didn't know us." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Because that's what humans do," she finally said. "When someone needs help, we come, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when we might not survive." "But why?" Her mother smiled, though there were tears in her eyes. "Because every person matters, every child matters, and some things are more important than being safe." Nira thought about this. She thought about the recording she had made, which had spread across the galaxy. She thought about the faces of the people who had fought and died so that she could stand here, free, looking up at the stars. "I want to be like them," she said quietly. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." Her mother held her close. "I know you will, sweetheart. I know you will." Above them, the stars shone bright and cold, ancient light traveling across the void. And somewhere out there, across all those countless light years, beings who had watched the battle were asking themselves a question. What would it mean to be like the humans? What would it mean to answer the call? The galaxy was about to find out.